Hi everyone, my name's Kylie. I'm the creator of Max Patch and the puppet maker for the show. Today we're going to be making a little mouse finger puppet. Now this one takes a little bit more time. It's a little bit more complicated than the other ones that we were making, and it's not so good for a large group to make together. But I thought with Easter holidays here that maybe it would be something nice for parents and children to sit down and do together. The other good thing about little mice finger puppets is they've got a pointy little nose, and so when they're on your finger they make a very good pointer. So that can be quite handy for parents and teachers. And when you want to read your story, you can get the child to put the finger puppet on their finger and use the mouse as their pointer. The first thing that you'll need to do is go to maxpatch.org, which is our website, and go to the Fun Stuff page. And on that page you will find the template for the pattern for the little mouse. It's pretty simple. There's only 3 pieces here, and you'll need to trace those or transfer those onto a piece of cardboard. I just used the cereal packets, which has a good stiff cardboard. And so once you've transferred it onto cardboard, then you can transfer it onto your fabric. For this mouse, I've used stretch velvet, which is a really good fabric to use. You want a fabric with a bit of give in it, so it moves, so that it doesn't matter what size the finger is that you put inside it, it will have a little bit of room to move. The good thing about velvet is that when you cut your pieces out, you can put the velvet good sides together and you can cut around it, and it sort of velcros itself together. It doesn't move, which is quite handy, because if you put 2 slippery pieces of fabric together and cut around them, they can make your life really difficult. And the good thing about with the ears, see, we've got one pink colour for the inside of the ear, and we've used this sort of bluey colour for the outside of the ear. If you put those together first and then trace around and cut around them, then you'll get them pretty much exactly the same size and shape. If you do each piece separately, it'll be really hard to put them together because they might come out slightly different. So that's one little trick. With the body of the mouse, I decided for this one that I would use a piece of furry fleece that I found in my scrap box. Now, we don't have much give on the fleece that way, but we do have a lot of give on the fleece that way. So that's going to be the width of our mouse, so that when we put our finger in, it can expand a little bit. I'm not going to use the shiny side. I'm going to use the furry side of the fleece. And what you want to do is fold it over, and then you need to figure out which way the fur's going, because we want the fur to go from the nose back. So we put the nose of our template onto the fur like that. But actually, what you have to do if you're marking your fabric and you don't want to see the marks, you want to put it so that the good sides are together, so that when you mark your fabric with a pen or a marker, the mark will be on the inside. So once you've done the body, you can cut out your inner. Now the inner should really be a cooler fabric. I've used cotton because cotton on your finger won't go all sweaty and yucky. When you've got your finger inside a finger puppet, it can get really hot. So any types of fabric that make that heat worse is not a great idea. So cotton sort of draws the heat away, and it makes it much more comfortable to wear. So I've just used an old sheet. You can use an old sheet or an old pillowcase. That's a great way to find some cotton, and you can recycle, which is handy. The other thing that you'll need for later on is a little bit of filler. Googly eyes, so you can choose whatever size googly eyes that you want. I've chosen a relatively small one. And you'll need a bit of cord or ribbon to make a tail. For the nose of your mouse, you might use a little bit of EVA foam, or you might use a tiny little pom-pom and glue that on. If you're using your mouse for classroom work or anything where it's going to be used quite a lot by children, you might want to embroider a little nose onto your mouse using cotton or embroiderer's thread. That way the nose won't fall off, and since it's such a small thing, it will get a little bit of wear and tear on the end, especially if they're using it to point out their reading or other things in the class. So once you've got all your pieces cut out, then you'll need to start sewing them together. If you want to sew them on a sewing machine, I would recommend not cutting them out first. They're so small, the pieces, that it would be really hard to keep control of them as they're going through the foot. So I would recommend just putting the pieces of fabric together and tracing the template onto them. Remember, good sides together first, and then sewing them and then cutting out around the sewing. So when we hand sew them, we need a needle and we need some thread, preferably a coloured thread that matches your fabric, but I didn't actually have the right colour, so I'm going to use something that's pretty close. If you sew nice tight stitches, you probably won't see it much anyway. So you want to thread that through and join your threads together at the end. And then what I do is I loop the thread around my finger, and then I rub it with the other finger and then pull. So when you rub it, it bunches it all up together, and when you pull, it pulls it into a little knot at the end. Sometimes it has a little loop, and if you're really fussy, you might want to chop that off. So we're going to do I call it a loop stitch, but that might not be the technical word for it. So we're going to sew our ears first so that they're all ready to go when we assemble the body. So with the ears, you want one of your inside pieces and one of your outside pieces. So we've chosen pink for the inside of our ears. We've put them together so that the good sides are together, the fluffy sides are together on the inside. I've used velvet for these ears because I had them all pre-cut. And then we want to come in the ear about 1 centimetre in, and we want to start our sewing from there. So you don't want to come too far in from the edge. If you make your stitches too big, you'll end up having no ear left. It'll be too small. So we go through to the other side. Watch your fingers on the other side that you don't poke them. I've spent years doing that. And then you pull it over back towards you and put it through again from the same side and then out. And pull it tight. Don't leave it too loose. So over back towards you, move across a little bit. See how my needle and thread are quite close together, so a couple of millimetres between each one. Pull it through and nice and tight, and then over back towards me, and then through, nice and tight, and pull it over back towards me. So you just keep doing that basically. Just make sure that you don't poke your fingers when it comes out the other side. I've spent a lot of time practicing, so I know where my fingers are. I'm pretty used to that. This is why they invented thimbles, because you would put a thimble on the end of your finger so that it didn't get poked when you put the needle through. So you just want to keep going round like that until you reach the end. So see with this one, I've left this little bit unsewn because that's going to be used to turn it inside out. Now when you want to get to the end and you want to knot it off, what you do is you make a loop around and you go through again and you pull it through, and you won't have this much thread by the time you get to the end. So you've got a little loop. Do you see that? Little loop. And then what you do is you take the needle and you go through the loop like this. This is a tiny little knot. And then you pull it tight. And you want to do about 2 of those. So make a little loop. See there? And then go through the loop with the needle and then pull it tight. And that's knotted off your thread and you can cut it off now. If you don't do a knot, it will all unravel. So do your knots. Now, once you've got it all sewn up and you've knotted the end, then we need to turn it inside out. So it can be a little bit tricky with the ears because they're so small. So you can push that through. You might want to use a skewer or a pair of scissors to help push that out. But then you end up with a nice little ear, the nice soft edge around the outside. So we have our 2 little ears. Okay, so the next step is to take our fairy fabric and our inner. Now the inner might end up being just slightly bigger than the fairy fabric, but the outer fabric will have that stretch to it. Remember we were talking about the stretch. Cotton doesn't have any stretch. So what you'll have to do is, as we're sewing it, just make sure you're stretching it as you sew so that it ends up with the 2 ends coming together. Now we want the good sides together. So I'm going to use the non-shiny side, so I'm going to put that together with my cotton. My cotton doesn't really have a good side. So I'm going to put that together with my cotton, and then we're going to sew along the straight edge at the back. So do you remember how we made the knot? We've got our needle and we've got our thread and we've pulled the 2 ends together. Okay, and then we make our knot by wrapping it around our finger. Oh, sorry. See that? And then we get our thumb and we roll it off our finger, and then we grab it and we pull that bunch together to create a knot. All right, so what we do is we again do a loop stitch. So we're going through our pieces of fabric and then over back towards you and then through again. Now the fabric that you use for the outer, you really want it to be something that doesn't fray too much. If it does have a little bit of fraying on the edge, then you want to make sure that your stitch goes in far enough so that it catches the weave. Otherwise the weave unravels in the fabric and it can drop your stitches and you'll end up with a hole in your stitches. So we're just going to go all the way along to the end, remembering to give it a little bit of a stretch as we go. If your fabrics match perfectly, then you don't need to stretch them out as you go. And just remember, always pull it really tight, because if your stitches are loose, then again you'll end up with a hole in your seam. All right, so we've got to the end of our seam along there. Now what we want to do is make our knot again. So we create a loop and then we put the thread back, the needle back through that loop and then pull it tight. Now just be careful when you pull it tight that you're also gentle enough that you don't snap the thread because we want to do it again. So we're going to push the needle through, make a loop, put the needle round and through the loop and then pull. Right, when you've tied off the end of your thread, you may have a little bit of thread left over, so don't cut it off yet. If you've already cut it off, then that's fine. You can tie another knot with another piece of thread, but it's a good opportunity to add your tail in. Now, your tail's going to go onto the end, so what's going to happen is it's going to wrap around like this. So what we do is we pull these parts out. So this is your inner and this is your outer, and we pull those pieces out flat and we put the tail so that it goes down the good side of your mouse on your seam, and we can fold that back over again. Oh, I'll put it down the wrong way. There we go, that way. And we can fold that back over again just to make it a little bit easier, and then we can sew the tail just onto the end of that seam. So just make sure when you go through that you push, that you catch the ribbon or whatever you're using to make the tail with the thread so that it's nice and tight. Make sure you do it nice and tight. So you're just going to go backwards and forwards. You're not going to go down there. You're going to just go backwards and forwards through the tail. And you're going to have to do it a few times because from my experience, children do like to pull tails. So make sure it's on there nice and tight and it's not going to pull out. So when you've done that, then remember, make a loop, go around behind, pull it through, pull it tight. And then, go that way, do that twice. So make a loop, go around behind. When you run out of thread, when you get to a certain point, you won't be able to make a loop again. So don't get to the point where you've got like that much thread because you won't be able to go round and through. So always make sure that you tie it off early enough so that you can still have that loop and get your needle round and through. Sometimes you might get to the point where you can't go through forwards, you have to go through backwards. So you go around and through backwards and then pull. And that's all right too. Okay, so you've got your inner sewn to your outer and you've sewn your tail into one end of that seam. So the next thing to do is to put your ears into the mix. So this is the good side of your fabric for your body. So we're going to put the ear, they're going to stick into these little darts here. So we're going to put the ear in. Now make sure that the back of the ear is heading towards the back of the body. So put that in there and then fold the front up so that those darts come together. We want the pink to be facing the right way so that when you end up with your nose at the front, the pink is at the front too. So just take some time to make sure that you've got it round the right way there. And then what we do, we're going to pull those darts, those two pieces of the dart together. The dart is the little triangle that's cut out into the fabric. And then we knot out our thread and then we go through at the point of the dart and we go round and through again and we catch those two pieces of the dart together. You go around and through as many times as you can until you get to the ear that's sticking through, the end of the ear. And then you start going through the end of the ear. Now, you'll see here that the end of the ear is like a little triangle that's sticking up. So to go around and over the triangle is quite tricky. So what you might need to do here is go through to the back and then turn around and go from the back through to the front. So this is another type of stitch. Can't even remember. I think this is called a running stitch. I'm not very technical, sorry. So through to the back and then change it over and then go from the back through to the front. So when you do this, you need to do it a little bit below the edge of the fabric, so you need to catch that fabric in there. So through to the back, and this is catching the ear as well, and then through from the back to the front. And then you could finish it off with a loop stitch, a couple of those through that ear, and then remember, make a loop, put the needle through it, pull it tight. Put it through, make a loop, put the needle through it, and then pull it tight. Now, so when we open the front up, we should have a little ear sticking up with the pink going towards the point at the front. So we do that again on the other side as well. Right, so now we have our inner lining, we have our outer mouth, we have our tail sewn into the seam at the top, we have our two ears sewn into the darts and nice and firmly. Now what we need to do is we need to sew the body of the mouse together, and we're going to do that by folding the good sides together. And we have to be really careful when we do this not to catch the tail or the ears in our thread. So what we do is we start at the front at the point where the nose would be, and again we're just going to do a loop stitch, nice and easy. So we put it through and then over and round and through. Do a few at the nose because that will be a pointy bit where it might come apart. So when you get closer to the ears, just make sure that you've tucked them right inside so that you don't end up picking up those ears at funny places. Otherwise his ear might end up all folded over and caught in the seam, and you'll have to go back and pull it apart and start again, and that won't be so much fun. So basically we go all the way till we get to about here. So we don't go all the way to the point on the other end because we're going to actually end up turning it inside out, and we need a hole to turn it inside out through. So we've sewn our body of our mouse from the nose right back to almost the end, not quite the end. So what we do now is we turn it in the right way. So we've got that end out, and we're just going to give a little poke so that his nose goes out as far as he possibly can. Now the next part is to use some of your stuffing, your filling, which I get from pillows. So pillows are really good because they're used to making them to be by your head, so they're going to be hypoallergenic anyway most of the time, hopefully. So what we do is I make a little sort of funnel with my hand around the hole, and I use my finger and I get it started by pushing the stuffing in through the hole. Now you don't want to stuff it really, really tight. What you want to do is put in a little bit and then push that so Sometimes it can be quite tricky with really thin things. Push that so it goes all the way to his nose, because you want the nose to be nice and full and firm, because that's your pointy bit. The rest of the body you want to leave very, very lightly stuffed. So you don't actually want to put too much into the body, because you're going to have a little bit of room to put your finger in. So we want enough to make the mouse, give the mouse a bit of texture and make him a bit plump, but we don't want to fill him up. So you might have to have a bit of a play around with that. Right, so the next part, we're going to close up that hole that's in the end so the stuffing doesn't fall out. So again, needle and thread and just a loop stitch. It doesn't have to look pretty, because that's going to be right inside your mouse, so you won't ever see it. Okay, we're almost there. So we've gone and sewn a little loop stitch over the end to tie up the end of the lining so that the stuffing can't come out. And so now basically what we've got to do is we've got to wiggle the stuffing around and push the cotton inside so that we can put our finger in there. So that is my finger puppet mouse, except there's one more little thing that we haven't done. We haven't done his nose or his eyes. So now it's time to give him some personality. One of the things that we can do to give our face a little bit more shape is we can sew a place to put the eyes. So what I do is I pick out round about where I want the middle of the eye to be, and I put my needle that's got with thread and a knot at the end. I put my needle through the face and out to the other side. You have to be careful where it's going to come out, because you don't want the eyes to be all lopsided. So try and make them nice and even on either side. And then what I do is I put the needle back in a couple of millimeters from where the thread came out. And just be careful again, look to see where the needle's going to be coming out on the other side, that it's only a couple of millimeters from where you put it in. And so you're going to pull nice and tight, not too tight that you break the thread though. And we're going to do that again a couple of times, coming out in exactly the same space each time. And what it does is it pulls a little dimple into the face, and in that dimple is where we put the googly eye, glue the googly eye. Now you could just glue the googly eye straight onto it, but I find when you do this dimple it creates like a little ridge in the face and it just gives it much more expression. So when you've done that a couple of times, then you're going to go through the fabric where the needle has come out. So just a little bit, not a huge stitch, and then you're going to do your knot. So around, you've got made a loop and through the loop and then pull. And then again, just a little, just try and pick up a little bit of fabric there. This can be a little tricky for the kids, so maybe grown-ups you might have to help with this one. And then through the loop, and then through there, and then pull. And then you can cut that off. The thing with googly eyes is they have a very thin sheet of plastic that goes at the back. And if you put your hot glue onto that, it will melt straight away. So what I do is I put a little dab of hot glue on one of the dimples and a little dab of hot glue on the other dimple. If you get a little bit of a spidery, webby wisp, don't touch it. Just leave it until it cools. So once you've put those 2 dabs on, just leave it not very long, just maybe 1 second, and then you stick your googly eyes onto that. It will mean that the hot glue will have had time to just cool just enough to still grab your googly eye, but it won't be burning it. Well, now that you've put the eyes on your mouse and you've figured out what sort of nose suits him best, I hope you're very happy with the end result. I'm pretty happy with mine. The fabric sometimes does dictate how they turn out. We've got a very short-bodied mouse here with the furry fabric compared to our long-bodied mouse here with our velvet. But they each have their own personalities, and I quite like that about puppet making. You never quite know how they're going to turn out. I'm going to have to try and think of some names for my mice. I hope you have fun with these, and I hope your mouse gets lots of reading done sometime this weekend. Maybe you could make them a mouse house at some point out of cardboard boxes or things that are left around. Have fun, and we'll see you again soon.